Feels like they're barely getting ahead. The middle class was never about being rich. It was about stability. But when people...
Who cares? Let the dealer eat that one. Who gives a fuck? Nah, it's my car. You're going to have to take it out of my cold, dead hands is what they're saying.
Or there's a very, very clear sort of pipeline to earning above the national average, and whatever your career is, you are relying on special...
But yeah, $65,000 a year is what is considered middle class pay now. And I looked it up in my area because I was curious. And in order to afford a family of 4, which is what we are, and to be considered middle class, the
$40K if I was lucky, but that wasn't enough to make ends meet. I had to cut back on a lot of things in life just to survive, as a lot of people do now.
They have a job. Some of them has 2 income. Outside, they look like a middle class, but after they pay the bills, there are nothing left. That's why you see a lot of families right now are living like working poor. And some even young people are doing poor choices, nothing else to do by joining the army. And that's where we are right now. And if you are new here, do me a favor, smash the subscribe button, share, comment, like, and let's check out this video.
More people signing up to serve in the military. So what exactly is behind the surge? Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth credits the Trump administration's leadership for the turnaround, but a new ABC News investigation finds the rebound actually started before the 2024 election, and that most recruits are signing up for reasons that, well, have far less to do with political reasons. Joining us now is our Pentagon and National Security reporter and Army vet, Stephen Bainan, who also broke this story. And even before you worked with us, Steve, you have done award-winning reporting on military recruitment. So I guess first I want to ask, what was the problem in the first place with recruitment?
Well, so the Pentagon estimates only 23% of young Americans 17 to 24 are even eligible to serve. So think about how small that pool is to begin with. The biggest issue, you can go back to the 1980s and hear national security experts talk about the obesity crisis amongst young Americans that's just getting worse every single year. So that's a problem that's actually manifesting into recruiting. The other one, it's even larger one, is academic performance. If you want to enlist in the military, you take basically an SAT style exam, and people are not only having trouble passing that exam, but also scoring high enough to fulfill some really urgent jobs in the force.
So when you look at the numbers, just listening to what the problem was, there was a period of time where, there were a lot of young people that wanted to join the military as a way to get out of poverty, as a way to get a job, as a way to see the world. I mean, I think back more than 20 years ago, covering, the Afghanistan war, the war in Iraq. And a lot of these men and women were so young, and they told me this was an opportunity to get out and do something special. Mm-hmm. So what is that a part of this rebound, or? Yeah,
I mean, economics is the main driving factor that gets someone to want to enlist in the military. This is backed up by the Pentagon's own polling data. Military service is probably the most direct path to the middle class. You get your school paid for, you get job training. The military itself is almost like a career fair that's always open. There's all these jobs, say about like infantry and pilots, but we also got there's plenty of administrative work in the military, mechanics, any sort of job that you would associate with any normal company. But a large part of the military are also folks that come from the middle class and may want to sustain that lifestyle.
So it's not Secretary Hegseth's ethos here. He's saying, yeah, it's up because, we're building up America and people want to join and be a part of the fight and the wars that we're taking on. That's not what the numbers or the data is showing.
No, people join for economic reasons. We interviewed about 40 recruits at various stages of the pipeline. None of them knew what a Secretary of Defense is or who it was or really recognized his name, to include people fresh out of basic training. But that's not unique to this administration. 17, 18, 19-year-olds, they're just not maybe following the news as much as some of us are. And recruits never really take their cues from senior leadership, as it's just so divorced from their day-to-day life.
What about, can you tell me, is it more men? Is it more women? Is it more of both?
Yeah, so people who are less likely to qualify for service are actually men. Male recruitment has fallen almost 35% in the last 10 years. Again, young men are unfortunately more likely to be overweight. They're less likely to perform academically, and they're more likely to have criminal records that can really get them kind of gummed up in the system if they're trying to enlist. We talk about this recruiting issue, and a lot of it has been entirely male. Women have actually been enlisting at pretty steady rates over the years, and their propensity to serve has remained pretty steady. They're more likely to pass the academic exam we talked about, and more likely overall to be eligible for military service.
Who's not signing up?
So the folks signing up right now are people that want more like academic or economic avenues to up their status in life a little bit. People who aren't joining, I mean, the biggest issue right now is what the Pentagon calls cultural influencers, parents, coaches. Those kind of folks can still have an effect. So we see things with quality of life issues in the Iran war.
So parents are watching the news, right, or they're following social media, even younger folks, and seeing what's happening, for example, in Iran, saying, okay, no way, I'm not going to do it.
Right. Maybe your mom and dad is a little less likely to drive you to the recruiting station if they see something that's going on in current events. But also on the flip side, 2005 was a really bad year for recruiting. That was also one of the bloodiest years for the Iraq war. But that recruiting rebounded in 2008. And what happened in 2008? The economic recession.
Because being middle class is the hardest fucking shit. You literally can't get no fucking help.
The American middle class is disappearing, and they don't want you to know about it. So the poverty line is a national metric, and it does not take into consideration your geographic living area, which means that the poverty line is the same in California as it is in West Virginia. To calculate poverty, the United Census Bureau is basically using an estimate of a bare minimum food plan from the U.S. Department of Ag and comparing it to a family's income. Government estimates that food is 1/3 of an average family's expenses. Therefore, if a family makes less than 3 times that number, they are considered in poverty. Though food is incredibly essential, so many things have changed since the 1960s that aren't taken into account in this calculation, as remarked by so many experts. These things include housing, transportation, childcare, medical costs. All of these things vary so significantly based on where you live in the U.S. If they updated the calculations, then a lot more people would qualify for help.
What would you say is the biggest difference that separates the middle class from the wealthy?
Unfortunately, a lot of people in the middle class got stuck there. And in America today, it's my opinion that you're almost better off being really poor than middle class, because there's a lot of benefits for the poor and the rich have all the privilege. The middle class kind of gets stuck there where they're not getting the free college for their kids or the free tuition, and they're not getting financial aid, and it's hard for them. But they kind of got stuck there because a lot of them were taught when you're very young that, listen, you're young, you go to school, you get a good job, you save money, you buy a house, you pay the house off, and then you retire with the pension. And that just didn't happen. And I think your generations figured that out, but my generation was sold a different story, and my parents' generation for sure. So the middle class kind of got stuck into that belief, and now a lot of them are in their 60s and 70s, and they're sitting there with no money, no resources, a Social Security which is anemic, and they're saying, oh my God, what did I do? So it's upon the young generation now to see this and know that's not going to work. So what used to work 100 years ago doesn't work today. You need to take responsibility for yourself.
So I just found out that 30% of Americans are not paying their bills. Yeah, you heard that right. 30% of Americans are not paying their bills. Now, if we look at the entire U.S. population, we'll round it up to 350 million. Let's say 350 million. Now, anywhere between 50 and 100 million of those people are not paying bills. They're not old enough to have expenses or be responsible for those expenses. So let's just wipe out, let's say 50 million to make it easy. So 350 down to 300 million. That means if 30% of Americans are not paying their bills, that is a little under 100 million people have just said, nah, I'm good. I'm okay. Not paying my rent. Landlord, kick rocks. Fuck off. Car, nah, who cares? Let the dealer eat that one. Who gives a fuck? Nah, it's my car. You're going to have to take it out of my cold, dead hands is what they're saying. And look, first and foremost, I have to give them all the respect in the world, because if you're telling your creditor to fuck off, you're giving them the middle finger. Shit, you might be giving them 2 middle fingers and just saying, nah, not getting money this month. Nah, not getting money next month. Maybe 3 months. No, 3 months. That's a little bit too soon. Like, respect to you. Respect to you. That takes a set of cojones. Now, for some of these people, it might just be desperation. They don't have a choice. They don't have another option. This is option A, B, C, D, E combined. This is the only way out. So for them, not as much respect, at least in terms of the cojones part. I understand where you're coming from, though. And I hope that the financial struggles those people are going through get alleviated sooner than later, if at all. I hope they get alleviated because I hate seeing this. And really, all jokes aside, though, it is disheartening to see that many people just giving up on paying bills. Not because it's a moral thing, like, oh, you should pay your creditors off. No, it's not about that. It's just the fact that they're in a position where they literally can't make another choice, where the only choice is to say, no, you're not getting paid. My heart goes out to people because I see them every day. I drive them every day. I'm not in great areas when I drive around. I'm not going out to the wealthy areas to pick people up. Very rarely do I. I'm always in the poorer neighborhoods. I'm always at the lowest income bracket, the bottom of the bottom. So I see these people. I talk to these people. They're great human beings. They're wonderful human beings. They're some of the nicest, most caring, empathetic people I've ever met. And they can't pay their bills, and it's fucked. It's fucked. But really what it shows is that the evidence is becoming irrefutable. The only thing that is holding this house of cards together is the stock market price, the fact that unemployment isn't above 4.5% yet, and because the CPI inflation report isn't as high as it was. What is it at? Like 3.1, 3.2, something like that, even though we all know the CPI is a load of shit. Those three numbers are holding the economy together. Those three numbers are holding the whole system together. And I want to hear what you have to say below, because I always tell you, I'm not always right, but I'm always real. And I want to learn from you just as much as I hope you learn from me, or at least gain something from my perspective, even though some people think I'm fucking loony, which I might be. But in any case, let me know what you think down below. Let me know what you're experiencing on the ground, because I want to get in touch with the reality of the situation where you're at so that I can learn and have a better perspective on what's going on. Because in my mind, this number is just another nail in the coffin to what is an already dead economy.
How often does the average middle-class American go on a family vacation? My boyfriend and I have been together for 9 years. Never been on a vacation together, just the two of us. Always had so many excuses. We met when we were 18, and so we were broke college students. Then we lived with his parents, and we were saving for our first apartment. Then we were saving for PA school. We wanted to set aside as much as we could because I wouldn't be employed for the 3 years I was in the program, because it was required that we didn't work while we were in the program. Then I graduated and I got my first job. Oh, but we were saving for a house. We saved for a whole first year and put aside every penny and put that as a down payment on a house. Now we're living in our house and we have credit card debt and we have student loans and we have all of these excuses. Like, there's always an excuse, right? And I feel like I haven't even lived. I'm 27 years old and I can name on one hand how many states in the United States I've been to. I can name on zero hands how many times I've been outside of the country. How often does the average person travel? Is it just me? Am I the only person who hasn't really traveled and I have FOMO for a reason? Or do a lot of people not travel? Or do people travel kind of locally and that's considered like a vacation? Because it feels like after 9 years as a couple, we should at least have gone on one vacation together, right?
You have been indoctrinated by wealthy people and by the politicians whose only job is to protect the wealth of wealthy people. You look at billionaires and think, wow, look at that guy living the American dream. He must have worked really hard. And then you look at the poor people as lazy. No one can work hard enough to earn $1 billion. And there might be some really awesome countries where it is easy to get out of poverty. But I'm not sure where you came up with this, because the U.S. is not one of them. Out of the 31 economically comparable countries, the U.S. comes in 27th place in social mobility, meaning that the U.S. makes it more difficult to get out of poverty than almost every other country. Here you're bragging about making 6 figures and someone asks you, do you understand the difference between 6 figures and 10 figures? And you said, don't care, which obviously means you don't know, so allow me to enlighten you. If you were to count to 100,000 without taking any breaks, one number per second, it would take a little over a day. 1 million, it would take 11 days. If you were to count to 1 billion, it would take 32 years. If you wanted to keep on counting until you reached Elon Musk's net worth, It would take you over 8,000 years. If you make $100,000 a year and pay 20% taxes on that, that's significant to you. Elon Musk could pay 80% and he wouldn't even notice it. His lifestyle wouldn't change a single bit, and his descendants for the next 1,000 years would still be rich. So while you're over here advocating for the wealthy to pay the same tax rate as us, they're buying Twitter out of boredom, building rockets for fun, and laughing at you. But don't worry, they're never gonna laugh to your face, because without people like you, they wouldn't be where they are. One more thing, and if this doesn't blow your mind, then you are just too far gone. Are you aware that our GDP is about 5 times higher than China's? And yet they are over there making commercials. They have commercials on TV about donating $1 a day to help feed hungry American children. Why? Because the rate of hungry people in this country is also 5 times higher than China's. How does that happen, you ask? Because of income inequality. In the last 40 years, the number of wealthy people has gone up. The number of poor people has gone up. The only one that's gone down is the middle class. You think that trend is just gonna stop? It will keep growing until there is just rich people and poor people. Are you really foolish enough to think that you'll be on the wealthy side? I think you are. And I also think that deep down, you believe you can identify with billionaires better than you can identify with poor people. You made it very clear that you don't care. If you had just a little bit of common sense, you would.
For all of y'all in my comments saying poor people shouldn't have children, do you realize that every middle class person in America is 1 crisis away from poverty? If you're upper middle class, you're 2 crises away from poverty. I get that most of you commenting are young adults who do not have kids. And we live in a society that is really antagonistic and hateful toward kids, and also toward poor people. And we also live in a society where we are constantly chasing wealth. Yay, capitalism. But let me tell you, as a 45-year-old, all it takes is 1 big medical bill, getting laid off from your job, 1 serious illness, 1 car accident, and your family can get tipped into poverty. So stop thinking that y'all middle-class white kids can look down your noses at people in generational poverty and think that you have more of a right to have kids than they do. And the privilege you're leaning into is incredibly precarious.
We've successfully price gouged the working class, sir. Good. Even though they can't pay their bills and are fully grown adults living with their parents because of a bad economy, we're still raising grocery prices. Perfection. And finally, as you've ordered, every time customers ask about why we're price gouging them, we blame it on inflation or cost of production. Fatality. They eat it up every time, sir! But why are we scamming them, sir? Look, this is just how business goes. But sir! The more they buy, the more the price increases. Sir, that is basic economics, but why are we raising the price to an unreasonable amount? To get more money. But you're a billionaire? Did you forget we have investors we have to pay as well? But sir, you're still netting billions after paying them! They're not the only one with bills. We have to raise the prices. Cost of production increased. Cost of production increased by a couple cents. You raised the price by a whole $1. Why, sir? That second yacht isn't gonna buy itself. Sir, you're a genius! Is this what you spend your free time doing? You see all these books behind me? Yes, sir! All these books teach me how to manipulate the American public. Sir, are you saying that instead of helping Americans, you try to manipulate them? Look, they're complaining, but they're not voting with their wallet. They're still buying the products. But sir, that's because you're manipulating them because you know you have leverage. Isn't that wrong? This is why you're broke and I'm not. But you're my employer. This is why I pay you minimum wage, because you're a minimum thinker. No! I can charge $8 for a king-size bag of Doritos because Joe Schmo is already addicted to our Doritos. So you purposely made the ingredients addicting and then raised the price to trap them? Now you're getting it. Sir, you're a genius! Sir, I understand this only benefits you, but did you know some people can't even afford a house? They can't afford a home. They can't afford a home. I don't care. I have like 90. How do you have 90 houses and I'm your employee and I still live with my grandparents? This is funny to you?
When I was on food stamps, my fridge was full, my pantry was full. Now I probably still qualify, but I don't get it anymore because I'm on the upper end of what income can access benefits. And this is what my fridge looks like now. Yeah, I'm cooking eggs. That's all I have in my fridge for me. My son is fed though. But also, guess who I'm not mad at? People on food stamps. It's our fucking system. And I don't blame the people who have more food than I do and less money. I just don't understand how some people think of it that way, you know?
I'll consider middle class because to me, that's poverty wages.
Hi, I'm literally studying this in grad school as we speak, and I have an exam in 2 days. So historically, when we decided what poverty wages were was in like the 60s, where cost of food was the highest. It was about a third of people's budget. Also, poverty was kind of more so decided based on the average white American family who owned property. And even if they were paying rent or mortgage, it was like, what, I don't know, like $200. The poverty wage formula is supposed to be 3 times the cost of food. Now, today, food costs have gone down. It's about 1/7 of our actual budget. So if we were to readjust the formula for poverty, for a family of 4, the wages would be, $61,000. This would be the official poverty line for America if we adjusted the cost of food and also put in the cost of housing and childcare, all of which are like newer costs that they were in there in the 60s because women worked at home.
But we don't have class solidarity because no one wants to admit what class they're in. We know that there's an upper class, right? But we don't want to say that there's a lower class. We say there's a working class. And only certain people get lumped into the working class bucket. If you are able to make your rent every month, everyone assumes that you're the middle class. And that's all that the parties, red and blue, ever play to, the middle class. When a lot of people are below that level. And there are the people who are above that level, who are in the upper class, who just like to say that they're comfortable because they're not in the billionaire class that they have access to. If you're looking at your income and there is no way that you will ever be able to own a home, you're not middle class. But conversely, if you have a vacation home, you're also not middle class. And until we can be honest about where we are on that ladder, we're not going to be able to get to the point where we say, we need to be paying into infrastructure that makes it so that everyone is getting the things that they need to sustain their lives from cradle to grave, regardless of your income level. That way, people won't be so tight-fisted about their investments because they're trying to keep the wolf away from the door. I have to invest. I have to gamble, because that's what investments are, on AI and the AI bubble not popping. Even if the AI bubble popping would tank our economy. There used to be a time where we didn't have so many bubbles and we didn't have to worry about people's, gambling habits impacting the bottom line for the entire country. You could have universal health care. You could have universal basic income. You could have public transportation that is free or low cost. So grandma could get to her doctor's appointments so that you don't have to keep a second home just in case you have to sell it to cover all of her medical bills, so on and so forth.
Why do some middle-class people hate the poor so much, but they don't hate the rich, when the rich take advantage of both the middle class and the poor?
Have y'all noticed this shift of middle class and maybe even upper middle class people trying to claim that they're poor now? There was a show recommended to me on Netflix called How to Get Rich, and I wasn't even a minute into the first piece of dialogue. The host, he's going through these people's finances and they're making $24,000 a month. I want you to think about what $24,000 a month would look like for you. How carefully curated would your bank account be if you had $24,000? For most people, that type of money would be a life-changing event. Now let's go back to the show. Guess how much they spend per month? $27,000 fucking dollars. Anytime I run across a TikTok video that's talking about the way of the world, talking about finances, talking about the economy, I don't disagree that we're in a time period where shit just costs
a bunch of fucking money for no fucking reason. You know what I'm saying? I don't disagree that inflation is whooping most people's ass. I do. I understand. But when it comes to the people who are making $24,000 a month and they love to scream, oh, I'm still living paycheck to paycheck. Well, I wonder why, Brenda. I fucking wonder why. Living outside your means is a real thing. Lifestyle creep is a real thing. And in the case of middle class, upper middle class, at this point, I don't think it's about the economy. I think it's the fact that you bitches don't know how to handle your finances. And this is a hill that I'm willing to die on. Cause how do you spend $27,000 fucking dollars and you only made 24?
Oh, I'm not poor. This won't affect me. Motherfucker, if you are one medical emergency or natural disaster away from crippling debt, then you're fucking poor.
You are not middle class. There is no middle class. Everything affects you. And the sooner you realize that and accept that,
The sooner you can organize and help make a change for the better.
What I don't like is middle class people that are born middle class and stay middle class their whole lives that talk down to working class people. If you've got a poor person who was born to a poor family and then they work poor jobs and they have kids and all those people will stay poor, they're kind of like on a track and they're kind of doing what is expected. But like middle class people look at this people and be like, wow, you're not shit. Like what a fucking loser. You work at Target, you work at Starbucks, you work at Walmart. Like what a loser. And it's like, okay, well, what do you do? Well, I'm an engineer. What was your dad? Well, he was an engineer. Okay, well, why aren't you a fucking millionaire? Like you had the entire world at your fingertips when your entire life. You went to better schools, you had access to the internet and computers, you had wealthy parents that were knowledgeable, that could be mentors to you early on, and you're doing the exact same shit that you did. But if you're middle class and your parents are middle class, don't you dare talk down to working class people whose parents are working class. Like you expected them to climb a whole fucking class when you had the world at your fingertips and you couldn't figure out how to make $1 million by your 40 years old. Get the fuck out.
But why are you apologizing?
I want to talk about what it's like to be middle class America with a child who is just diagnosed with a critical disease that requires monthly infusions, chemo, and another mixture of medications. My husband works for the state police, and he makes about $800 more a month than I made when I worked full time and he stayed home in 2022. In 2022, I was making $21 an hour. Our family was living perfectly fine. We had 2 car payments. We had a pretty low insurance premium. We had health care, and we were able to go on vacation. We were able to buy groceries. And I do remember during that time, the gas prices being pretty high and gas pretty much sucking during that time. But post-pandemic and inflation, it kind of made sense. Now, our family is making $800 more a month. Our mortgage payment is higher because our property taxes went up. Our car insurance doubled. Our healthcare premiums went up by 15%. Our health insurances aren't covering a lot of the medication. Our savings has been depleted because of all of the hospital stays and everything that has hit our family. We are choosing whether we can pay our electric bill or if we can go downstate and get my child's infusions. We also have to drive 3 hours down to Ann Arbor, Michigan, at gas prices being over $5 a gallon. We're not making it. And you know what people are telling us to do? Get more jobs. They're telling my husband to work more than the 2 jobs he already works. And I stay home to take care of our disabled child. But we're great, right? We're great. And I know the struggle is not my fault. It's not because we're not working hard enough. It's not because we're lazy. It's not any of that. It's because right now our government is making it super, super hard for people to even survive. You have to make 6 figures to survive in this economy right now. And if you don't, well, you're probably gonna file bankruptcy. But thank you for voting for this. And thank you for taking middle class away. We now have the poor and the rich. Only 2 options.
I hate to break it to you guys, but social class isn't something you can self-identify as like Lily Allen does, right? Being working class or middle class isn't a choice, right? It's a defined, measurable characteristic that's determined by your circumstances, not your feelings, okay? So here's how you know if you're working class or middle class. Now, if you're working class, you will be earning below the national average salary of £39,000 a year. Your work will not rely on any specialist skills and knowledge. It'll either be semi-skilled or low-skilled work, and you won't own the means of your own production. It won't be your own business that you're working for, all right? If you meet those tests, you're definitely working class, okay? Now, to be middle class, right, you would probably need to be earning above the national average salary, or there's a very, very clear sort of pipeline to earning above the national average and whatever your career is. You are relying on specialist skills and knowledge to do your work, and you may also own the means of your own production. You know, you might have your own small business, or you might be a self-employed plumber or something like that. So middle class is quite a broad category, and a lot of different people fit into it. You know, you could be a self-employed plumber with your own van, making 60, 70,000 pounds a year, and you will be middle class because you own the means to your own production, you're relying on specialist skills and knowledge, and you're earning, you know, significantly above the national average, right? Middle class. Similarly, if somebody's, you know, a newly qualified teacher or a newly qualified doctor, you know, they're relying on those sorts of specialist skills and knowledge to do the work. And while at the beginning of their career, they may earn below the national average, there's a very clear sort of career development there to earning well above that later on. Okay, so they're middle class too. All right, so that's how you know, right? That's how you know if you're middle class or if you're working class, all right? So I don't want any tradespeople making 100 grand a year telling me they're working class. You're not, guys. You're middle class, okay? You're just that type of middle class, all right? And I don't want to hear about, you know, people who've got an undergraduate degree in English literature who are working in a call center telling me they're middle class because they've got a degree. You're not middle class. Your degree is completely irrelevant to your work. Your work relies on no specialist knowledge or skills. You do not own the means of your own production, and you are well below the national average in terms of your income. You are working class despite the fact that you have an undergraduate degree, because, you know, your undergraduate degree is not relevant to your work. All right? You're still doing working class jobs.
Do you want to know why America has exactly 0 days of paid vacation time, paid maternity leave, or paid sick time? It's because American capitalists are greedy, and giving the working class those benefits means they make less money. Do you want to know why the federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, and it has been that since 2009, literally 16 years ago? It's because American capitalists are greedy, and raising the minimum wage for the working class means they make less money. Do you want to know why America does not have socialized healthcare despite over 60% of the population advocating for it? And year after year, it becomes more and more expensive while simultaneously becoming less and less effective? It's because American capitalists who own the for-profit private healthcare businesses make money off of you getting sick. And the more sick you are, the more healthcare they can sell and the more money they make. Also, when they tie healthcare to your job, it makes you a desperate worker, and desperate workers make cheap workers. Do you want to know why the price of housing is so high? It's because American capitalists are greedy, and the less homeowners there are, the more renters there are. And simultaneously, when there's more renters with high rent, the higher the rent, the more money they make. Also, when the working class has the fear of homelessness looming behind them if they lose their job, it makes them a desperate worker. And desperate workers make cheap workers. Do you want to know why our education system is crumbling? Because while American capitalists want the working class smart enough to run the machines, they don't want them so highly educated that they question the system. And the more educated the working class is, the harder they are to exploit. And finally, do you want to know why it doesn't seem to matter who is in office? The working class's material conditions continue to deteriorate decade after decade, while capitalists have never been richer, resulting in the largest wealth gap this country has ever seen, larger than what sparked the French Revolution. It's because American capitalists have obtained so much wealth from your exploitation that they have essentially bought out all of the politicians who write the laws to enrich their own class at the expense of your hard work. If you work for a living, you have to understand that you are part of the working class. And until the working class gains some sort of class solidarity, our material conditions will continue to deteriorate. And it will not get better until we can put our differences aside and understand collectively who is exploiting us and how they are able to do it.
I see a lot of videos of people who are definitely poor class thinking that they're middle class, and I'm going to tell you right now, the actual salary needed to be considered middle class, and I mean just like the lowest salary possible needed to be considered middle class, is $65,000 a year. And that's the 2021 updated version. It's probably more now, if I'm being honest, considering inflation and price gouging. But yeah, $65,000 a year is what is considered middle class pay now. And I looked it up in my area because I was curious, and in order to afford a family of 4, which is what we are, and to be considered middle class, the bare minimum pay is $70K a year. My husband doesn't make anywhere near that, but most military members don't, to be honest. But I honestly find that really fucking crazy. Like, a lot of people really think that they're middle class, but in reality, the majority of Americans are poor. That's why 64% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Most Americans are just not paid enough.
Riddle me this, America. How is it that the middle class is basically the spokespeople for America? Like the white picket fence, you've got a house, you've got the family, the middle class that sits in the middle. We're the spokespeople for America and American living. Yet we are the only class that doesn't receive anything from America. If you're in the middle class, you don't get help. There's no handout. There's no help. There's no extension. If you fall short, you just fall short because you make too much to get help, but not enough to pay for anything. You don't make enough to invest and to build and to grow, but you make enough just to stay exactly where you are. In America, being in the middle class means possible stagnation because you have to go extra hard. And this is coming from a woman that has worked her life since she was 19 in corporate America. Then started a business with her husband. Did all the things America said. Bought a house. I did it all. I did what they said. I did it all. And I'm here to tell you, it's a bamboozlement. They lied. Once you join the middle class, once you come up here in these streets, you're going to want to leave. It's only up or down. And up is harder to get into because once you get in there, I mean, it's hard to stay up there. It's really hard to get there because they make it sure that you can't get there. Because with living with middle class money, you don't get help. You have to pay full price for everything. There's no discounts for the middle class. The middle class has to pay for it all. For it all. We are the spokespeople for the American people. American life. And we are the ones who get the least amount of help from America. We literally have to get it out the mud and stay there. Like, boxing out all day long. That's what we have to do. We really do.
Listen, man, I make over 30 an hour. I got a damn good paying job. Listen, if a nigga was to tell me at 18 years old, if a nigga said, yo, Diz, at the age of 36, you're going to be making over $30 an hour, and you're going to be struggling, I would have laughed in his fucking face, man. For real. I would have laughed in his face. You couldn't have told me that at 18 years old. I would have thought that I'd be living like a king. I don't live outside my means. When I say I'm struggling, that's just to pay bills and to buy food. Inflation, the economy, everything is fucked up. There's no middle class anymore. We're literally the working poor. You have the working poor, and then you have the filthy, rotten fucking rich. Like, something needs to change. Something needs to give. We can't fucking live like this. This is not a way to live.
Stand up. Pardons. And now, final ground push to this case. Take a bite.
So, how's everybody doing? Fantastic. We have literally never been better. Yeah, terrible. We can't keep doing this. Lower class and I are overworked, underpaid, and exhausted. Wages are stagnant while the cost of living and corporate profits are at an all-time high. Everything is unaffordable. My rent is 60% of my income. The planet is dying, and I'm pretty sure we're about to enter into World War III. Hey, can we ask them? Hear me out. Have you thought about having kids? Why would we do that? You want them to be trapped in a cycle of poverty. That's pretty fucked up. Oh, thank you. Okay, new plan. We are going to make abortion illegal. Nice. What if Instead of stripping away bodily autonomy from roughly 52% of the population, you subsidized the rising costs of childcare, healthcare, housing. You helped to increase wages. You could even try actually taxing corporations and billionaires. Actually, that isn't ever going to happen. Ever.
Working a full-time job, having 2 incomes is still not enough to support the 4 of us. And I don't know why. We're both professionals. We have to pay for our kids to go to school. We have to pay for all of their supplies, everything. Class fees, locker fees. And yeah, we definitely pay property tax, and it gets higher every year. And somehow, we still can't make it. We don't have a mortgage, and we still struggle. We still struggle. So, I don't know.
The social class that you are born into is likely going to influence your behavior for the rest of your life, even if you change classes. And this can be explained by imprinting theory. Imprinting theory suggests that during very sensitive periods of our life, we learn behaviors to get through that period that influence us the rest of our life, even when the environment changes. This isn't for everything. Some imprints don't stay very long and some stay forever. And one of those that stay forever is class. I first encountered imprinting theory when I was designing my first study on social class disclosure at work, where I interviewed white men who had moved from a lower class to a higher class, and I asked them, do you disclose your lower income background at work? And if you don't, are there other cues that give it away? In those conversations with those men, it became very clear that even though they had changed classes, that their first class was still their identity and what they considered normal behavior. They could be grateful for their new class and perform in it effectively, but it was not who they were. For example, I had one tell me, look, I'm still a blue collar man. I just wear a suit now. I had another tell me that he could play the game, that he could socialize with people in upper classes, but it wasn't the hat that he wore in his leisure. Famous French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu theorized a lot about class. And that's a different field from mine, but we found similar things. He says that your class influences the habits you enjoy, the way you connect with people, the values you have, and just the way you think things work, the way you do things. And he called this the habitus. And everybody has a habitus, regardless of what class they're in. But most people aren't aware that they have a habitus. In my line of work, where I've researched the unwritten rules of work for people from low-income backgrounds, I would say a habitus is like having a rule book you don't realize you have until you're in an environment that plays by different rules. And everybody else seems to know what to do. And then you're like, hey, can I borrow your rule book? And the other person's like, what are you talking about? Doesn't everyone do this? Sound familiar? This is why I give workshops on unwritten rules at work. Because if somebody works really hard and gets really lucky and moves into a different class and goes to a bougie work environment, they can look around and say, where is the rule book that everyone has? Because I don't have it, even if they're excellent at their job. And this is going to influence them feeling ostracized and deciding if they're going to stay at all. It can also lead to a lot of miscommunications, which will delay work. And miscommunication, 70% of business leaders already say is the #1 business problem. And while our circumstances may change, our original rule book doesn't. So if you're curious, send me your email and I'll shoot you my outline on my Unwritten Rules of Work workshop to see if it can help you out.
If you are under the age of 30 in Wisconsin, I want you to answer this one question. Do you actually believe you will own a home in the next 5 years? And I'm just genuinely curious, because for a lot of people, it doesn't feel like a goal anymore. It feels like a lottery. Like you have a 1 in a million chance to make that happen. Home prices just keep climbing. Mortgage rates are still high. Insurance just keeps rising. And property taxes aren't getting any lower. Like every year, it feels like the amount you need to save gets pushed even further away. But our wages aren't increasing at all. Like, it's ridiculous. And then people wonder why our generation keeps renting. It's not because we don't want to own a house. It's because every time we get close, the finish line just keeps moving farther and farther away. At some point, we have to stop asking why young people in Wisconsin aren't buying homes and start asking why so many people just can't get their fucking foot in the door.
Remember, we didn't move to your wealthy area. You moved to our working class blue collar areas. You moved to Southern and Midwestern communities. You knew how cheap the homes were. You knew what the prices were. It was a part of the attraction. No one's leaving the South and the Midwest to go to the West Coast and to the Northeast en masse. It's not happening. No blue collar working class Americans are sitting here thinking, you know what I'm going to do? I am going to sell my home and I'm going to move somewhere that I cannot afford. And then I'm going to complain about that and complain about all the people living around me, even though I chose to move to this place and plot my manufactured home in between a bunch of mini mansions and McMansions and whatever. No, that's not what's happening. What's happening is that a lot of people from the West Coast and the Northeast, from New York, from California, they are moving down to these states in the South and the Midwest en masse, in droves. Why? Because they have remote jobs now, because after COVID, everything went remote. So it was a lot easier for them to pick up and leave when things got really crappy and they realized, hey, we have created a mess here. We have to go. People from New York and California are moving to places like the middle of nowhere, Texas, and the middle of nowhere, South Carolina, and then sitting there and saying, you shouldn't be able to complain. You're just complaining. You're just jealous because your house isn't big and my house is. You're stupid. You don't know how to financially plan well, and it's your fault that you can't afford your home anymore. I shouldn't be able to live where I want to because you're not wealthy like me. No, that's not what anyone's saying. No one has the right to tell us that we didn't plan financially for where we lived. What we did was we chose to move somewhere that was a blue collar, working class, middle class, rural community in the South of the Midwest, either where we grew up or we were transplants who actually wanted a change. And we moved somewhere where our income and our status matched the price of the homes. We moved somewhere where we could raise a family and have an American dream while staying within a budget. The only reason that's changed is because of your presence. So you can't sit here and have a leg to stand on when you complain to us and say that we have no right to be upset. We have no right to tell you that we don't want you to move here or to feel frustrated about our property taxes being raised, when in fact you're the ones moving to an area that is below what you make, below your status. It is not a wealthy area. It is not an elitist area. It is being turned into that. If you really want to be a part of an area, then buy a home at buy a traditional home in the area for a normal price. Be a part of the community. You didn't listen. You didn't listen. When people tried to tell you, hey, this is a blue collar working class town. We won't be able to afford our homes if you keep moving here. But you didn't care. You didn't listen. And now you're upset that no one wants to be your friend and no one's really excited that you're coming down here and changing the economy and improving it. You're not changing the economy for any blue collar working class or middle class Americans. You're destroying their American dream. And that's it.
Bestie, let's talk about it. For some reason, there are so many people in America who think they are closer to being a millionaire than they are to being unhoused. There's a creator on this app. If I find her, I'll tag them in the comments. I'm not sure what their pronouns are. They're right here in New York City. They're in recovery. And a little tidbit about me, I'm in recovery. I have been for almost 10 years. They're unhoused and they work in harm reduction. It's like the triple whammy for evil ass people commenting on their videos. And the comments they get about homelessness and being unhoused are really just nasty fucking comments. And without fail, it's always from like regular middle class people, okay? And I find that very interesting because especially here in America, the vast majority of us are living paycheck to paycheck. Like, the stats don't lie. The vast majority of Americans are a couple missed paychecks away from being unhoused or worse. A ton of Americans have millions of dollars in debt from medical debt. A ton of Americans declare bankruptcy every year because of medical debt, because we are the only post-industrial nation without universal health care. So just getting sick continues to the poorhouse here. And Third, there's all this research that's coming out about how dire the economic state of most of America is. Like, I saw a study recently that was like 39% of Americans admitted, like in the past year or two, to skipping meals in order to pay their mortgage. And I saw the New York Times last year did a story about people using Klarna, buy now, pay later, in order to buy groceries. And Klarna and another app called Zip, I don't know what it is, Zip Pay in 4, they said that they saw like a 95% increase in Americans using their services, buy now, pay later, in order to pay for groceries. Groceries are a necessity, okay? So I just don't understand how you can make fun of unhoused people, how you can make fun of poor people when you yourself are also poor. Like, most of us are poor. Most of us are just doing well enough, okay? So, but that comment is correct. A lot of people think they're closer to being millionaires than they are to being unhoused. Baby, you're very close to being unhoused, actually. Yeah.
This right here cost me $115 after tax.
Isn't this the part where they brought the guillotine out in history? My fellow dying middle class. What are we doing? And before you're like, oh, we're just like trying to work. But like, what are we doing? Where is the rent strikes? Where are the organized protests? We need to have some camaraderie in here. You've got to stop just posting TikToks. Isn't posting a fucking TikTok, is it? What if, hear me out here, radical kindness at the expense of corporate greed? Right, hear me out. Because like middle class Americans, like you're the cashiers working these jobs. You're the baristas working behind the counters. If you're working for corporations, just start giving shit away. Or if you see people, like we're just gonna start getting some sticky fingers, and like our fellow middle class Americans are just gonna turn a blind eye. Because the CEOs can't do anything. They can't do anything about it. They can't stop you. They're nowhere to be found. They're busy lobbying in fucking DC. For legal reasons, this is a joke. I'm just saying it could actually probably be very effective.
Working class is not a dirty term in the United States. It's simply a term that we do not use. And people have been getting very frustrated on my video about the show The Middle, where I discuss the fact that The Middle is a show about the middle class in middle America. And they get very mad. They're like, no, they're working class. They're working class. And I'm like, they would be working class if this weren't America. If this were England, sure, they'd be working class, but Victoria Beckham's parents were also working class in England. So there's a completely different thing where Victoria Beckham's parents owned a Rolls Royce and were still considered like working class, right? Right. Because they weren't upper class, because they didn't have a title. We don't have titles in America, so therefore we have different terms than, say, people in England. But no one ever wants to accepts that, because when I discuss the fact that middle class has multiple structures in America, there's lower middle class, middle class, which isn't fully a thing, and then upper middle class, people get really mad and say, no, the people in the middle, which is literally titled the middle because they're middle class in middle America, are actually working class. They're in poverty, they're poor. And it's like, yeah, people in lower middle class are poor, but they're still lower middle class. Because there is a difference between lower middle class and poverty. There is a difference between lower middle class and poverty, especially in America. And no one ever wants to actually take a look at that because to be able to take a look at that, and when I say no one, I specifically mean people outside of America who think that the only terms and structures that should be had are the terms and structures that they have in their countries. Which is an insane thing, because when Americans try to talk about their own class structure, they should be able to use their own terms, right? It's not America centrism or whatever. It's literally just discussing America versus other places. I'm not even bringing in other places in any of my middle videos until people decide to start telling me, well, it's working class, isn't it? Working class? No, because Americans have kind of taken out working class from the structure. It's not a dirty term. It's just a term that we do not use. We have taken the term middle class and upper class and gone with that. But people are mad because they think that middle class shouldn't exist and that it should really just be working class for some godforsaken reason. And it's frustrating. It's not classism. In fact, I think that it's a lot more classism in like other European countries where people who are working class are mocked in a very different way than people who are poor in America. which you can see in the show High Potential, both versions of all versions of the show High Potential, and how Morgan's character in each version of those shows is treated for being poor. Bye.
Don't be fooled. Inflation isn't being driven by the government spending on the poor and middle class. Inflation is being driven by corporate greed. Politicians should be required to wear a jacket that has all the corporations sponsoring them, just like NASCAR. But the large corporations are spending little to no taxes. Price gouging tactics are causing everyday Americans to fall victim to working in unsustainable working conditions for low money. The federal minimum wage of $7.25 is barely enough to even afford a gallon of gas today. Starbucks workers unionizing for better working conditions is not the reason your venti latte is $12. We must get corporate greed out of politics at all costs. And that means we have to show up. Now and in November.
We have new numbers. So USA Today released updated income levels to determine how you know whether or not you're in poverty or you're upper class. And these are based on individual income. This is not combined household earnings. This is not family earnings. And honestly, I don't have a problem with these numbers. I think these numbers are pretty close, regardless where you live, that you would fall into these class categories. Where I do have an issue is where people are landing statistically. And what I mean by that is, right, we have middle class at 83 to 125,000, but realistically, only about 18 to 20%. So 1 in 5 people are actually meeting that level. In fact, only 35 to 40% of households make over $100,000 a year combined. And so it's not, for me, it's not a conversation of whether or not these numbers match for individual earners. It's what's the likelihood someone even falls into these categories, right? The categories are irrelevant if 80% of the population is lower middle class and below. I think that's the issue, and that's what we're missing on this.
Did you know that the middle class didn't exist in medieval times? At least that's not how medieval people thought of themselves. They didn't divide themselves into upper, middle and lower. Instead, you got those who fight. This is the nobility, the landowners, the knights. Their job is to be really good at fighting so that they can defend the other two classes. You have those who work, i.e. the farmers. They're about 85% of the population, and their job is to feed the other two classes. And you got those who pray, i.e. the clergy, and their job is to save the souls of the other two classes. You might not think this needs to be a whole class on its own, but if you believe, like medieval Christians believe, then saving your soul is just as important as eating. And of course, just like our class system today, there's a lot of people who don't fit neatly into any of those categories. There are sailors and servants and craftsmen and artisans. But yeah, don't go telling a 12th century farmer that they're a peasant in the feudal system, because they will have literally no idea what you're talking about.
What I would like to say here is that two things can be true at the same time. On the one hand, it is true that the median or even the lowest level of working class American has a much higher grade living state, expectation of living, than nearly anyone else in the world. We actually got to see that on full display while the World Cup crowds were here, and many of them were experiencing common U.S. staples like Waffle House, ranch dressing for the first time, and having their minds absolutely blown by it. But not just that stuff, things that are institutional to us, like something a lot of, especially European and East Asian travelers are wowed by here in the U.S. is the size of our cars and houses, because they're usually an order of magnitude larger than anything that's available over there. Another thing would be air conditioning. That's something that we have here in the United States in abundance that pretty much no one else has. So yes, it is true that we are objectively pretty darn well off and are often kind of numb to that thing. But also, Americans are bad at spending. Like, both of those things can be true. And yes, also to the reality that there's some wage issues going on and inflation from COVID and all that. Like, those things are things that people struggle with in today's society. That's true. However, the reality is that people don't abide by their budgets. Just think about all those Rocket Money ads that exist where somebody will just be, how many subscriptions do you have? And they're usually blown away by the number that they do in fact have that they haven't even been using because they signed up for a free trial in order to get something and never went back to cancel it. Some people having multiple Spotify accounts, multiple streaming service accounts, multiple all sorts of stuff that they just were not aware of. So yes, are there economic circumstances that are difficult to navigate in today's society? Yes, that's true. Are Americans also incredibly, generally irresponsible with what little margin that they do have? Yes, also. Like, both of those are true statements, and they are not contradictory to one another. And also, Caleb Hammer, Dave Ramsey, all these, they are not, let's say, pious povertyists, the way a lot of people think they are. But also considering, like, Caleb Hammer specifically, of that he's very middle of the road, kind of vanilla libertarian, meaning that he's very pro-LGBT, pro-cannabis, pro-tobacco, nicotine, pro-vape, pro-Zen, pro-alcohol, pro-any of that stuff. Like, all those things, he's on that side of it. And so if somebody was to spend a substantial amount of their money on one of those things, he wouldn't be aghast at it unless they were neck deep in debt at the same time, which a lot of people would also see that as an issue of that you're spending all this money on this addictive chemical that could be going to paying down your medical bills, that could be going to some other thing, especially in the circumstances where whatever that habit happens to be is directly in contradiction to or in conflict with some health concern. Like if someone has bronchitis and yet smokes 2 packs a day, or let's say someone has a severe insulin resistant diabetic disorder and yet they consistently are consuming high sugar or high added sweetener foods. They would probably take issue with any one of those things, as anybody with a reasonable functional frontal lobe would. The common threads, if you watch any of those broadcasts on a regular basis, common things that tend to come up on a regular basis are streaming services, DoorDash, Uber Eats, fast food, regular trips to the convenience stores. Why? Because that's all spontaneous recreational spending that could very easily be going to something else that's more important, something else that could help them get ahead in life. For instance, just for contrast, if you had a person that was really struggling to make rent on a regular basis, but one of the reasons that they were struggling to do so was that it's because they were subscribed to the gym that's in the bottom floor of their apartment building because they're trying to get in better shape, I don't think Caleb Hammer or Dave Ramsey would have any problem whatsoever with them keeping that gym membership so that they could get healthier.
Being in the middle class and going on vacation in the United States is hilarious. I'd come back from vacation and people would ask what I do. What do you mean what I do? Do you think I was drinking OJ? You think I rented jet skis? My vacation is that I went. One time I went to New York with my family and we bought baguettes, prosciutto, cheese, and olive oil, and we'd make sandwiches in the park to not spend money in restaurants. And then we went to Boston. And after we ran out of free things to do, we went to the mall 3 days in a row to window shop. Not even buy anything. We went to window shop. Now that I live in Europe, one of my favorite waitresses at a restaurant went on vacation to Greece. She stayed 2 weeks in Greece and as waitress. And you know, middle class, I'm sure she's making her way, but can you just imagine? I don't even think being in the middle class, you could do things while you get to your vacation. Getting there is the vacation. Like, you have to be seriously rich to be able to do things at a vacation. Sometimes my vacations were just going there, just being there, the road trip or whatever. Once you're there, it was like, listen, we spent so much to just get here. Let's relax a little bit. I don't even know if the middle class can do a vacation other than just getting there nowadays. Like, getting to the vacation spot takes so much money. So once you're there, like, you're going to spend more? Where's it coming from? What are you going to do? You're going to rent jet skis? Okay, 500 more bucks? Okay. And one time I went to Florida and the weather sucked. So we stayed at the pool the whole time. didn't even go to the beach. Can you imagine risking so much money to go on vacation and the weather sucks? That'd bankrupt somebody. Morally and financially, that's it. I'd have to go to therapy. Seriously, if I was saving up to go on vacation and the weather sucked, I don't know how I'd deal with it. It would just be the end of the world for me. But here's a video I took of a couple kissing at the park, and that made me happy.
Poor and working class people are obsessed with morality and virtue because they haven't found success in their life. So they cope by moving the goalposts from external success to internal success, which they conveniently get to define. So if you don't have the talent or the work ethic to succeed, then you need to feel superior somehow. And what better way than being a good person, which requires nothing? And then they say they would give away all their money if they were ever rich and just help communities. It's like easy to say when you've never been tested, bro. You're just trying to feel better about yourself. It's cope. And by the way, I'm not rich at all, okay? I am the working class person. The point of this video is not to say it's okay to be a bad person. You absolutely should be a good person. I just can't stand these morally righteous losers who can't admit that they'd rather be on a yacht in Italy. At least I can.
Has anyone else had the experience of being first generation middle class? Like your parents grew up in a really poor family and then some things worked out for them. Like they didn't hit the jackpot. Vacations were still just driving a few hours to visit relatives. You got your shoes at Payless. You felt like you might be in trouble asking for like $10 for a school field trip, but they could buy a starter house in the suburbs. You didn't eat at restaurants, but there was always food, but they didn't really know how they did it. And they definitely didn't know how to go beyond it. Like they were the first ones they'd ever known to get out of poverty, and to the folks they'd grown up around, they hit the big time. But you, growing up in the suburbs, were always the poor kid, the one who'd never been on a plane or could afford college and had to work as soon as the law would allow. And the only financial advice you ever got was don't ever get a credit card and save every penny you have. And now you feel like you should be doing better because, hey, you started off middle class, but your parents were so focused on not slipping back into poverty that they never taught you how to build on where you started. So now you've spent your entire adulthood feeling like you failed and you're recreating the wheel just to get back to whatever financial place they were at. Is that just a me thing?
You're not angry that SNAP recipients are buying name brand Fruit Loops. You're angry that the American dream you've been working your ass off to attain has been a complete and utter lie. And you're rightfully angry. You have either spent years getting that higher education that you were promised will give you a better salary than you could achieve otherwise. And if you're on the older millennial side, you may even remember those graphs they showed us in high school where they compared salaries between a high school and college graduate that made you proud to get into that top 20 institution. Or you've been busting your ass in a trade or a manual labor job or driving a truck and sleeping in shitty-ass motels going on literally 20 years, picking up overtime, making up the literal infrastructure that makes this country function. At 5 a.m., you're working in the rain, sleet, snow to ensure that society literally doesn't crumble. You've been doing all this, working your ass off for the promise of a nice home in a decent neighborhood, a couple cars, a couple kids that could easily afford the piano lessons, the matching sweats for football camp, the decent back-to-school budget, a vacation once or twice a year, a weekend away with your spouse, weekends at the movies. And instead, you're barely making it to the end of the month and stretching a grocery budget that has tripled in cost for the same exact shit that you used to buy in the last 5 years, just praying that your second vehicle with 220,000 miles that your wife uses to commute will last another year so that you don't have an additional $700 a month to spend between the car note and the full coverage insurance. You haven't taken a full weekend in 6 months because you're side hustling those days too because you really want to give your wife the romantic weekend you've been putting off for the last year. And then you're at the store and someone on EBT gets name brand Fruit Loops when you had to get the bulk off-brand Fruit Loops on your shopping trip, and that shit pisses you off because with the amount you work, you should be able to get those name brand Fruit Loops without a second thought. But you can't, and that's why you're pissed. Don't tell me that it's about health or the cost of Medicare or whatever. It's because you're fucking exhausted physically and mentally, and watching someone get through assistance what your 20 hours of overtime couldn't just makes you angry. And you're right to be angry. You should be. But not at the person who likely is also working full-time at the job that isn't paying enough for them to put the roof over their head and feed themselves. You should be angry that your wages haven't moved in 15 fucking years while your rent and property tax have gone up 10% every year. that your tax dollars are bailing out the wealthiest motherfuckers in this country and subsidizing the poverty wages of the biggest welfare queens this country has ever seen, the fucking Walton family, that shouldn't be allowed to pay the kind of full-time wages that force the taxpayer to feed full-time employees. And the reason that they continue to do so is because they've, squirreled you into blaming someone working full-time for not fucking working enough, or not having the right skills, or not working at the right place. Or that you've been convinced that raising wages to livable will make your burger cost $20. And now your burger is $20, but wages still haven't changed. The fact is, people that are on assistance should be able to survive. But you're angry that what you're doing also is surviving when you should be thriving. And you should be. Busting your ass 80 hours a week should make it so that you're not worried about name brand cereal. And instead you're online going, billionaires don't owe you anything. Fuck that shit. Who the hell do you think keeps Amazon warehouses running? Keeps Instacart shoppers shopping? Keeps people behind the counter for the rifle you want to purchase at the Walmart? Who do you think creates that kind of gluttonous wealth? I swear, most people really don't understand inherently what a billion really is. 1%. 1% of 1 billion is $10 million. 1%. That means that someone with just 1 billion can spend $10 million a year for 100 years before they run out. Jeff Bezos is worth over 235 billion. And you're literally defending that shit as if his gluttonous piece of shit ass can't afford to at least pay the people making him rich a living fucking wage. The Walton family is worth over 400 billion, and they think that your tax money should pay to feed the people making them rich. The people taking public transit to work every day because they can't afford a car, and what you're worried about is the $36 you spend in SNAP benefits yearly. Again, if you have 1 billion, you can spend $10 million a year for 100 years before you run out. The fuck do you think anyone needs 400 billion for? Direct your anger towards a shareholder system that stiffed workers, because if you're out trying to earn a living every day, your nemesis aren't the other people trying to earn a living every day, or disabled people or children. They're the people lining the pockets of a government who hasn't given a shit about your interests in decades. And the last time that there was a thriving, happy middle class in the U.S. was in the post-war 40s and 50s. And besides the spending power that the middle class dollar meant back then, you know what else was happening? A 90% tax rate on the wealthiest class that benefited off that middle class labor. This is what gutting education has done. It's created people who think that it's fair, that they pay to feed full-time employees of people who have so much gold that they could pay all 1.6 million employees who work for them $100 an hour and not even notice a change in their overall wealth or lifestyle for 20 generations. I'm done.
People frequently claim that immigrants and poor black families are living off the system. They're on welfare. They're mooching. But here is the truth. The majority of people on public assistance in the United States of America are white, and most of them have jobs. They just don't make enough money to survive without a little bit more, because wages are low, rent is high, a lot of jobs don't come with benefits anymore. You can't have a job without a cell phone. You can't even find a job without the internet. But it's not poor people who are eating up the most dollars in public assistance. Nope, it's the middle class. It's people who can take mortgage deductions, and, of course, corporations cashing in on subsidies. But nobody calls that a handout. SNAP, Medicaid, housing assistance, those aren't loopholes to help billionaires save some more money and line their pockets so that they can get more yachts or whatever they do with it. They're lifelines for millions of people. And here's the kicker. Those programs keep all of us safer and more stable. If you're mad that someone's getting help, maybe just look at why they need it, not just who they are. Think about this. A friend of mine said he grew up in a third world country, and he said that in those countries, Petty theft and, pickpocketing and crimes like that are common because people have to do that to get enough money to buy food and to pay for a place to stay. That's going to happen in our country if we don't get curious about where the waste in our government really exists.
What are you talking about? Malcolm in the Middle wasn't poor. I used to watch them growing up and I liked them because they were just like my family and we were solidly middle class. Like, they had a house. They weren't poor. My family rented. They had 6 boys and 2-bedroom house, but like my family had that same 2-bedroom apartment. We didn't even own it and we had 6 kids in there too. So like we were fine. Like, they had 2 cars that were barely working, but they had 2 cars. My family just had 1. Like, sure, they only really went camping or doing those types of vacations, but so did my family and we were middle class. And like, yeah, they had to go to the food pantry a lot, but so did my family and we were middle class. Like, I don't think people realize that families working 80 hours a week is just kind of normal. Like, my family wasn't able to pay rent at the end of the month either, and we figured it out, but we were middle class. It's kind of crazy people keep saying that they're lower class just because they couldn't afford healthcare. Like, my family couldn't afford healthcare frequently. Like, we never went to the doctor growing up and we had to hide injuries, but we were middle class. Like, they couldn't be doing that bad. And I think it's crazy because, like, yeah, sure, their sons share underwear. You've never had to pass down underwear to your siblings. It's just being thrifty. Like, I wore my sister's underwear until we were like maybe 15. Like, that's just normal in a middle class household. And people are saying they never had new toys. I never had new toys. I only shopped at thrift stores. Like, we were a very average middle class family. So if we were doing that, they probably were too. It's really odd that people keep saying that they were poor when clearly they were not poor. Like, most of the time they could even pay their electric bill. Like, their electric looked like it was on the majority of the time. How were they poor? It's just wild seeing how many people are so like headstrong and just so stubborn and saying that they are poor, when I grew up in a family that was definitely worse off and we were solidly middle class. So make that make sense.
This is very accurate. Americans now are struggling. That's no lie. Most Americans have been effectively priced out of the house market for one reason or another. I'll do an economics video explaining a little things about that later. But yes, the buying power of $300,000, assuming where you want to allocate it, is not the same anymore. And so the golden standard of the American dream is well above $300K. Because owning a house, 2 kids, and a car, that's just been priced out for most people, unfortunately.
A lot of people don't know about this, but they need to, and it needs to be talked about. Most jobs in the U.S. that used to pay well and have people be middle class are now no longer that way. Most of them are paying people minimum wage now. One of them being trucking, but also a lot of other jobs too. In the trucking industry, people used to make over $100K a year doing that. But now with how high gas prices are and how little companies want to pay them, they're now making minimum wage, maybe $40K a year if they're lucky, 50 on the higher end for most of them. Not all of them, but most of them. And there's a lot of other jobs that do that now too. Mechanics, construction, people who do landscaping. People who do the trash. A whole lot of different jobs are now not paying people that much money anymore. Factories are another one. Factory workers used to actually make a good amount of money. Now they don't. Now it's minimum wage. And I was someone who worked 70-hour weeks in multiple factories, and guess what? Every year I made about maybe 35K. 40K if I was lucky. But that wasn't enough to make ends meet. I had to cut back on a lot of things in life just to survive, as a lot of people do now, even though they work hard, even though they put those hours in. But guess what? They're still not getting paid that much.
Let's call it for what it is. The middle class Americans have been sold a lie of what used to be the American dream that no longer exists. It was always go to school, get a job, max out your 401k, work for 40 years, and you're going to have what you want. You're going to be taking care of the rest of your life. Meanwhile, housing has doubled, cost of living, inflation, groceries, gas. I mean, the list goes on and on. One paycheck used to support a whole family. Now, 2 incomes are struggling to do the same. My opinion at this point is if you don't have multiple streams of income, you are never going to retire and you're not going to have what you want in your life. I'd love to hear in the comments what you think.
The Malcolm in the Middle debate is so funny to me because my mom was making the same debate as Gen Z back in like 2003. But the thing is, my mom, my parents were both like dysfunctional artists and I grew up like poor. Like to me, the family in Malcolm in the Middle was like doing a lot better than we were. And they were, I considered them like higher work, like working class, maybe teetering towards middle class if they like, had a little bit more stability. And this was in like the early 2000s. My mom used to call them yuppies and she thought it was so funny. This is so funny. So this is an example of she hated anything that she considered yuppie. She thought the suburbs were like death. She thought that mainstream media was like a cult and like a total like mental affliction to believe what you saw or read or heard, or to feed into any sort of like pop culture phenomena, whatever. Anyway, she was just like she was like these fucking fake ass poor people, and she would just talk about how like she thought it was like bullshit basically because like poverty is not monolith, right? And so what's represented as poor in the media even then was still not poor compared to a lot of the people that we knew or us or like people in my community, in my neighborhood. It's still suburban poor, which means that they own their house, they own their cars, and yeah, they're struggling for sure. And they're not like doing well, but they're also not like, they're not lower working class or, they're probably poverty line technically. But when you have assets like a house and cars, when you have assets, you can always sell your assets. If you don't have assets, you can't sell your assets. And that means all the money you have is the only money that you have. I don't think it's a new idea that the family in Malcolm in the Middle is sort of like a digestible level of poverty to mainstream media and to the people who are, ingesting mainstream media. Like it was a very intentional thing because like, if you look at a show like Shameless, granted it's like, non-network TV, but it's like that shows like actual poverty and like, and to anyone who's experienced actual poverty, Malcolm in the Middle is like, yeah, they're not doing great, but they're also not like, they're not struggling in the same way that somebody who has to move all the time because your family can't afford like the rent out for a while, or like doesn't have a car to get somewhere because in the middle of like a negative 30-degree snowstorm because you don't have money for a car, or you can't you can't go to the doctor because you don't have health insurance and your family can't afford to pay for just a regular doctor visit. Those are different things than like the Malcolm in the Middle family. And like, again, they're definitely working class, but they're like not actually poor the way that actual poor people are poor. It's like this idea that you're poor because you can't get a new car. You're poor because you have a small house. You're poor because like, you can't go on an expensive vacation. You can only like go camping or something. That's not poor. That's budgeting. But let's look at this bonkers breakdown of what differentiates working class or like lower working class, middle class, and upper class in the United States in 2026. It's pretty insane. I'm gonna put my glasses on because I do actually need them. So lower working class is below 60K. That's still about twice as much as I've ever made in a year. So 66K is the cap on that. I'm not the only one. In fact, sometimes in my like artist circle, sometimes I'm making more than some of my friends. So that just by itself, you got to think, and this is just artist circles, like we're doing better than a lot of people who are in lower income areas in the South or in like small rural towns where there's not like, like at least there's access to work here. At least there's like opportunities here in LA or in Chicago where I'm from. Like there are so many people who are living on probably like a quarter of 60K a year. So middle class is 60K to 180K. I mean, I understand that like if you're trying to like, live a kind of more normal lifestyle, buy a house, if you're trying to like live a comfortable life and get all the things that you're supposed to get in life according to capitalism and society, then you're going to need that 180. But the thing is, it's unfathomable to a lot of people to even have $60,000 a year. Upper class is 180 and above, obviously. So many people don't realize how many people in this country live on a fraction of what is just considered the poverty line. So, in conclusion, the characters in Malcolm in the Middle are not poor. They are solidly working class, dual parent income on around minimum wage jobs. They didn't have a lot of money. They were overstretched. They had 5 kids, but they owned assets. They had a house. They struggled to pay for that house, but they had a house. They had cars, and they were able to put food on the table, even if they had to cut corners sometimes. And so I leave you with the words of my late mother in 2002. That's not real poverty. The media is lying to you. They're all just fucking yuppies.
The Democrats are the party of the college-credentialed elites and the dependent poor. So all of their policies are either about flattering the vanity of the rich or sustaining the poor that won't work. And meanwhile, everybody in the middle, the hardworking people who listen to your show, who you know about and who you respect, they were not represented by either party until Trump came along. And Trump showed up and said, wait a minute, why is no one standing up for the hardworking American? And
they don't understand that the middle class is de-evolving, and there's only going to be one color that's the majority of this country, and that's poor. Okay? And when people are poor and you're living paycheck to paycheck, you don't have time to nothing. You can't save, you can't build, you can't grow, all right? And you're at the will of whoever will hire you. Okay? Well, I guess I'll go work at Taco Bell. It's only 5 open. What the happened to America? What about our promise? How come the rich pay the least amount? How come a company like GE, who paid $19 billion last year, paid less taxes than you did? Why? $19 billion in profit, and they paid less taxes than the average taxpayer. They paid 0. They got money back. It's ridiculous.
So I'm watching The Middle because I need a new comfort show to watch. And by the way, it's really great. Like, the acting is amazing. Sue is definitely my favorite character. But it's so funny because it premiered in 2010 and they're a working class family. So there's lots of scenes of them eating fast food. And it's funny to think that just 16 years ago, fast food was a cheap option for poor families. And just 16 years after that, it's not. Even though the politicians and CEOs would still like to pretend that it's affordable.
Hi there. Let's talk about this number right here. This is how much debt I have. I'm about $180,000 in debt from both federal and private student loans, my car loan, credit cards. That is all of my debt. I am 24 years old. I have a bachelor degree, so not even a master's. I have 1 minor, no focus in my major, as well as an honors degree, which did require some extra credits. So that is where this number is coming from. This is on top of the little amount of scholarships that I was awarded, so money I didn't have to pay back. This is everything I owe. Everything I owe. I came out of college in June of 2024, and I did not look at the debt that I was accruing. I took out loans as I needed them each year for college, and I didn't really think about what the percentages meant because I was never taught financial literacy. I didn't think about what the realistic number was going to be that I would have to owe each month on these loans, and they are astronomical, I will say. Sally Mae, which is my private loan creditor, wants $1,800 a month from me. That's just Sally Mae. I am right now in a grace period for 12 months where I only have to pay $1,033 to Sally Mae. I would not be able to afford the $1,800 a month if I wasn't able to get it down for 12 months. I don't know what I'm going to do in 11 months, but this is just me talking about it. On top of that, I owe about $287 to the federal government per month. That's not changing. And I owe $202 for my car payment. And that's not even including the $150 or $60 that I owe each month for the car insurance or my credit card payments. That doesn't include any of that. So alone, Sally Mae wants $1,800 from me. I graduated college, as I just mentioned, in June of 2024, so this last year, and I wanted to just have a nice summer because I have been doing school for the last 5 years, and I've been taking summer courses full-time every year, and as well as working full-time. So this is also, the debt I have, and I was working full-time,
during the summers and I was working part-time during the school years. So that's all, like, I still had no money, like, and I had to take out loans. So being 23 years old, almost 24 when I graduated, I decided that I was just going to get a part-time job. So that way I could only work part-time during the summer and kind of enjoy the summer, because I had been doing over full-time in schools and working and had a role in my sorority. And I decided that I was just going to work part-time. And if I had looked at my loans fresh out of college, which I highly recommend you do if you have loans, do not wait until they are due to start looking at them. I decided to do that and made barely any money, but I didn't have any loan payments at the time during the summer. And I wish that I had started making the payments as soon as possible on those loans while I had them. So I worked part-time. Around November, my best friend was like, hey, I have loans. You have loans. Have you looked at what your loan payments are going to be? And I was like, shh, can't be that bad, right? Wrong. I looked at my loan payments and I cried. Because I was not taught financial literacy. And I didn't understand how a credit company for student loans could charge me $1,800 if I wasn't making that much. I thought, okay, there must be something similar to the federal aid where you can do it based on income. No, they don't offer that. So I would also look into that before you take out student loans, if they're going to offer income based or anything. They don't offer that. The best I could do was bring it down to $1,000. And then I was struggling to find a full-time job. I applied for like 3 months to over probably 500 jobs before I finally found one. This is the catch, that doesn't even require my degree. I found a job that paid $20 an hour, 40 hours a week, and it was degree recommended, not required. So I felt very grateful for that opportunity. I just don't understand why companies and jobs want you to have stepping stones, but don't consider your degree to be the stepping stones or the foundation for working for those companies. And they want to pay less money for more years of experience. It doesn't make sense. It's really hard to find a job right now, like really, really hard. Anyway, flash forward, I'm doing this and I'm able to make my bare minimum payments, but that doesn't matter because in 12 months, I'm still going to owe $1,800 bare minimum on the Sallie Mae loans, and I cannot afford that. And I make $41,600 a year before taxes. Now, flash forward, I'm at this job for a couple months and I start to struggle really badly with my mental health. I'm talking like can't get out of bed except to go to work, really struggling, losing passion for everything, falling into a mix of, I would say, seasonal depression because it's winter and I struggle with that a lot. And also depression because my life is not going the way that I want it to go. And that is a hard thing to grasp. And also debt is really hard. It's a hard thing. And like a lot of people struggle with it. So it's not just me coming on here. Like I'm very grateful and I am privileged. And there's a lot of things that are going well in my life, but like that debt is still looming over my head. And that is a real thing. I decided that this job was not worth staying at any longer because of how much it was impacting my mental health. I was crashing out all the time and I really tried to stick it out, but I was just really starting to see no purpose in my life, even though it was helping me make those bare minimum payments. I have since put in my 2 weeks and I'm going back to 2 part-time jobs that I've calculated out will make the same amount of money I make at this full-time job that I supposedly got with my degree. So I'm still going to make $41,600 and be able to make my bare minimum payments. But I am really worried about what I'm going to do in 11 months when I have to owe $1,800 just on Sallie Mae. I am putting this out there as like kind of a way to warn people about looking into what your loans look like. Teach yourself financial literacy, but I'm also putting this out there to ask, what's the best case scenario? I don't really know what to do, and I've been trying to do research. I don't want to get sued by Sallie Mae. It's hard to find a job. I don't really want people coming on here being like, well, just go find a higher paying job. You were silly to drop down to 2 part-time jobs. That is not the advice I'm looking for. I'm looking for a best way to knock out my loans and start paying them off faster with what I have. I'm making the bare minimum payments and a little bit more And that's basically all of my income. And I'm looking for other ways to make extra money. So if I have to start door dashing as well, I'm going to go back to a job where I'll also be making tips. All of that's going to go towards it. What is the best way? Should I attack the ones that are high interest first? Should I go after the ones that are the smallest? Like, I'm genuinely curious, best way to knock out these loans, because I'm trying to be debt free. There was a time in my life where all I wanted was to make a ton of money. I don't care. Financial freedom to me looks like being debt free. I would love, and I'm not saying this is possible, but I don't think it's impossible either. I would love to be out of debt by the time I'm 30. That's 6 years from now. I have a lot of debt. I don't know how possible that is, but I would have to put all my money towards it. I've not made good financial choices. Like, I'm literally going on a trip in April. Like, I'm not saying that I'm perfect or that, but that's aside the case. That is aside the case. The point is, I can make the bare minimum right now, and I know that I could make more if I need to. Despite going on this trip in April, we don't need to talk about that. I'm still making choices, but I want to find out a way that I can get out of debt. I'm trying to find all these extra ways to make money. I'm going to keep probably eventually in the future apply to jobs, but it's just, this is the reality of it. It's just like, it's not like I'm magically going to make more money to pay off this debt. I am where I'm at. So I don't know. I'm looking for help, and I'm also trying to give some advice, but you should really educate yourself on financial literacy before you decide to take out loans. And if you have the opportunity to go to community college before going to a university, I would highly recommend doing that to save yourself as much money as possible. Because at the end of the day, as fun as the memories were, and I'm so grateful for my friends and the people I met, and they are obviously priceless. Knowing what I know now, I don't know if I would ever put myself in that position to let myself get into $180,000 worth of debt over school. So my credit's also shit, by the way, because of all the loans I've had to take out. So that is my story. And yeah, I just kind of came here to talk about it. I feel like it's important to talk about. And a lot of times I think we're kind of ashamed of it, but that's really it.
Being poor is hard, but being middle class, that's a special kind of hell nobody talks about. You're not poor enough for assistance, but you're not rich enough for freedom. The poor gets food stamps, housing vouchers, and tax breaks. The rich, they get loopholes, lawyers, and passive income. But the middle class, we get stuck with the bill. We pay full price for everything, and when we can't keep up, they blame us and tell us to budget better. They got us working 60 hours a week, can't afford healthcare, can't afford daycare, and God forbid you make $2 over the income limit, then boom, all your benefits vanish. So they punish you for trying to do better. Middle class isn't the American dream. It's a fucking treadmill. You run, you sweat, you grind, but you never actually move forward. And every year they crank up the speed just to watch you fall.
America's getting rid of the middle class, and whether or not it's intentional or not, it's exactly what it feels like. For decades, being the middle class meant you could build a comfortable life without being wealthy. You could afford the basics, have a little breathing room, take care of your family, and still believe that next year might be better than this one. But somewhere along the way, that started falling apart. Housing numbers climbed faster than incomes. Healthcare became more expensive. Childcare became another mortgage payment. Groceries, insurance, utilities, almost everything takes a bigger bite out of the paycheck. And even people making what used to be considered good money, or a considerable amount of it, are even asking themselves why it still feels like they're barely getting ahead. The middle class was never about being rich. It was about stability. But when people work full-time, make decent money, and still feel like they're falling behind, something's changed. And maybe that's why more Americans are asking, is there somewhere else my money, my time, and my energy could buy me a better life? Because America may not have eliminated the middle class yet, it's well on its way.
Republican economic policy is the reason the middle class is suffering today, and I can prove it in one chart. Before we dive into this chart, we have to go back to 1980, where Ronald Reagan introduced trickle-down economics, the same economic policy Republicans use today. The theory is basically the more corporations make, the more it will trickle down into the pockets of everyday Americans, everybody wins. But this chart proves that only one side actually wins, and that side is obviously corporations. This red line represents corporate profits over the last 40 plus years, and this blue line represents personal savings for regular Americans over the last 40 years. Obviously, you can see the money did not trickle down. And as it stands today, we are facing the largest disparity between personal savings and corporate profits ever. And it's important to know that it has not always been this way, because if you look before Reagan came into office, these two trend lines overlapped. Personal savings and corporate profits were trending together. And that's because in this era, we were appropriately taxing corporations and wealthy people and building the strongest middle class in American history. And on this side, in the Republican era of economic thinking, we are drastically favoring corporations, and what happens to regular people? Nothing good. And it can all be traced back to right here, when trickle-down economics began and corporations got favored and people got tricked into thinking it was good for them.